Welcome, everybody. Going to give a few more seconds to let people come on in. And we'll get started. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon everywhere, almost everywhere. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Dealing with Feelings, starting the school year with emotional insight. Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Nick Yoder, Associate Vice President at Harmony Academy at National University. We host these webinars to bring together thought leaders and educators to share best teaching practices and tools to support student social and adult social, personal, and academic learning. These presentations are the opinions and content of our guest speakers and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Harmony. You will receive a copy of the recording to watch and share with your colleagues, so be on the lookout for that in your email. So here's what we've got planned for today. Through our conversation with our guest author, Marc Brackett, led by our university president, Marc Milliron. But they spell their marks differently, so that's exciting. We hope that the audience will learn more about the science of emotion regulation, practical strategies for classroom and beyond, and tools to empower educators and students to thrive. But first, we're going to start with a poll. We can find out a bit more about how our audience is feeling in this moment. So Amanda, can you launch our first poll? So we definitely took this from you, Marc, how you are feeling at the start of this webinar. Tired, overwhelmed, present, content, curious, or energized. We know that when we think about our emotions and how you all feel today, and how aware you are, we know, how the audience is coming in and how we can best approach our conversation. So we thank you all for kind of putting in how you are feeling today. Looks like almost everybody has answered. So Amanda, do you want to share the results? Thank you. So it looks like most people are curious with a quick behind on tired. So I really like that you're all curious, present, overwhelmed. I know Marc and Marc are gonna have a really great conversation. So if you're tired, I know they're gonna uplift you and get you energized. So we are excited to talk about Dr. Brackett's new book, hot off the press this week. Congratulations, Marc. Dealing with Feelings, Using the Emotions to Create the Life You Want. So the book is really about today's fast-paced, high-pressured world, and one skill separates those who thrive in school, relationships, and everyday life. From those who struggle or burn out, emotion regulation. This book takes educators and school leaders deep into the science and practice of emotion regulation and shows how to apply the books or strategies to support both educator and student well-being and success. Readers will leave with renewed energy, deeper insight into their own and others' emotions, and a toolkit of self and co-regulation strategies that can immediately transform classrooms and school communities. We are excited to give random numbers to 200 live participants on behalf of Harmony, ship a copy of the book to you. The selected winners will definitely hear from us this week, and good luck. So, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marc Brackett, author of the new book, Dealing with Feelings, and the best-selling Permission to Feel, now translated into 27 languages. And he's the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and professor of the Child Studies Center at Yale University. He is an author of more than 200 scholarly articles, with his research featured in the New York Times, Good Morning America, Today, and the Huberman Lab podcast. Marc is the co-creator of the award-winning How We Feel app, a powerful tool helping over 3 million people improve their well-being. He also recently launched the Dealing with Feelings podcast, featuring conversations with leading scientists, authors, musicians, and cultural influencers. Guiding our conversation today is our own president, Dr. Marc Milliron. He is an award-winning leader, author, speaker, and consultant who works with universities, community colleges, K-12 schools, foundations, corporations, associations, and government agencies across the country and around the world. He serves as the president of National University, one of the largest private nonprofit universities in the United States. The faculty and staff at NU have catalyzed the careers of community difference makers in service industries such as education, healthcare, business, cybersecurity, engineering, law, criminal justice, through an array of bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs. So I'm super excited to welcome Mark and Mark, and thanks you for having the conversation today.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. And hey, Mark, glad to have this time to kind of dive into the conversation a bit. Hey, just right out of the gate, want to ask you, after the kind of just powerful success of Permission to Feel, and just the kind of family of conversations and energy that came around that, what really kind of drove you to put out the new book, Dealing with Feeling? How are you extending the conversation?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Permission to Feel came out like just before the pandemic. And I think people might have not wanted to have permission to feel during the
Your
period of it.
permission to numb is what they were looking for then, right?
But a couple of things happened. One is, we all were freaking out in the very beginning because none of us knew what the heck was happening. I mean, it's so, it's been 5 years now, really, when you think about it. I mean, when you think about our lives back then, like spraying our groceries with Windex, don't going into we didn't go to the grocery stores or without masks or anywhere. I mean, it was just a very heightened state of, of anxiety and fear. And so people said things to me like, Mark, thank you for giving me permission to feel, but now what the heck do I do with all these? And I started wondering, like, how much did people really learn about emotion regulation?
Yeah.
And what I found was that less than 10% of people learn very much of anything about regulating emotions. And then I did research on that. And so I decided to then focus my studies on the strategies that people would use to help them regulate. And I realized that people like needed a guide for that. And so that's
Yeah.
what I decided to do.
No, I love it. I mean, again, it's almost like a two-step process. Permission to feel, like let's get that sense of awareness and mindfulness, and then now what do you do? Like, right?
One thing that's interesting, Mark, and this is like I'm stealing maybe a little bit of the future of our conversation, but is that what I found in my research is that the first strategy that is actually the most helpful for regulating your emotions is permission to feel.
Yeah. Which makes all the sense in the world because you have to have a sense of awareness of where you are to kind of, we always say in the world of education, we've got a whole audience of educators, like the art of high quality education is meeting a student where they are and then guiding them on the path that they are desiring to go. And part of what we're, in some ways in this is we love the concept of healthy learning, creating a healthy learning environment. Part of healthy learning is doing a good assessment of where you are and figuring out where you're going to go. But that mindfulness, that kind of awareness of your emotion really was at the heart of Permission to Feel. And it feels like in this book, the real heart of it is I think one of my favorite insights out of this book is this idea that self-regulation and your ability to kind of manage your emotions, it's a skill. It's not some people have it, some people don't. It's like this is something you got to get some reps. You got to learn how to do this, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And don't think, well, they're good at it and I'm not.
I couldn't agree more. I think that honestly, if I was jumping to the beginning of terms of permission to feel being the primary strategy, but if I were to jump to the end, my hope is that people will kind of incorporate healthy emotion regulation as part of their identity.
Yeah.
And like if you walk around the world thinking like I am, you know, a feelings expert, I am, really skilled at dealing with my feelings. Nothing you could say can hurt me. It kind of how you respond to things in the world.
Yeah. And again, the ability to, I guess, enter a situation where you can understand what might be happening and how you're managing this moment. I'll use an analogy that might not fit, but I'd love to see where you take it. I taught competitive martial arts for years as I was growing up, and one of the things we said is there's no such thing as a fight. You're managing an energy moment. Like, and one of the most important things is to realize kind of in that moment how you're redirecting the energy and figuring out how you're going. I kept thinking about that in kind of reading this book, is this idea that it's an energy moment. You've got the energy and the kind of dynamics of your own emotions, and then the energy and dynamics of other people's emotions. But I want to begin with that, like managing yourself first, because it's almost impossible to do that co-regulation, that connection with others, until you like manage yourself first. So talk a bit about that. Like you have to begin with you and then build this skill. And then once you do that, you can start extending, right?
Well, firstly, I don't know if you knew this, Mark. You probably didn't, but my whole career before becoming a professor was a martial arts instructor.
Oh, wow. There you go.
So I have a 5th-degree black belt in a Korean martial art called Hapkido.
Yeah, I know Hapkido. Yeah.
Uh,
I did Chuan Fa is what I did.
and so there's so much overlap there in terms of just the mindsets,
Yeah.
around emotion regulation. But this idea of self-regulation, I think, is interesting because a lot of people, I think of it as self-control. And yes, if you're on a diet, you probably should like have self-control and not eat the donut, or the cookie. There is self-control in it, and that's part of the process. But it's not the only thing. It's a piece of emotion regulation. And I want to say that out loud because I think
Yeah.
so many people think, oh, it's about control. Like, don't say it, don't do it. And really, the definition I have of emotion regulation is learning how to use all of your emotions wisely to achieve well-being, have good relationships, and attain the goals that you have
Yeah.
in life. So that's a very different mindset. It's like using emotions wisely. Just want to say that. And I think, I was having a conversation with my colleague just a little while ago, and she's like, I don't know if I have a hard time understanding the self thing and the co-regulation, the self thing. And I said, well, here's the way I like to think about it. A child comes into this world with a temperament. Some kids are more kind of reactive, some kids are more sensitive, some kids are more kind of resilient in the way they kind of deal with their environments. But they're not brought into this world with skills, right?
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, a skill has to be learned. And so the way we experience the world is in large part, based on our biology and of course some of our upbringing, but how we deal with the world, how we deal with the disappointment, the frustration, the overwhelm, the feedback, the being left out in school, the exclusion, the shame, whatever it is a learned skill.
Yeah.
So my point of that is the adults who are raising and teaching kids have to be good models of that. Because that's the only place you're it starts at home, right?
Right.
And so if your father is saying things like, son, toughen up, or, or your mom is saying, boys don't cry. What are you learning? You're learning to suppress your feelings. And if you have someone who is kind of an emotion coach as a parent, or I call it an emotional ally, they're creating the conditions for you to experience your emotions, but then they work with you to regulate them.
Yeah.
And that's, anyway, go ahead.
No, I love it. And it goes back to, I love there's that famous book, The Power to Teach. Sorry, the courage to teach, where Parker Palmer talks about this idea that technique will only take you so far because who you are is screaming so loudly from the front of the classroom, right? So you as a person and your ability to kind of manage self stands out so much. And that kind of like your ability to develop this skill set is actually one of the greatest gifts you can probably give to your kids, like in your classroom or to your kids in your home. It is this, you're breaking and probably an intergenerational cycle of reactivity, right? To emotions in some ways.
Still trying to break my cycle of reactivity. It's a funny story about that. So my mom, who is a beautiful, lovely, caring, good mother, my mother cared more about her kids than anything else. She just didn't go to get a graduate degree in emotional intelligence. And so she just didn't deal with her anxiety very well. And her go-to phrase whenever something went wrong in our house was like, I can't handle this. I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown. And so 4 years ago, I'm on a flight with a colleague, and I had to go to a place I didn't really want to go, and I was tired and overwhelmed. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm having a breakdown." And I'm like, "There goes mommy." Um, so we are learning this, from our parents at a very young age. And then
Yeah.
also in sports and in classrooms, I
Yeah.
mean, endlessly in contexts where either there's good role models or not.
Yeah, we're actually our psychology program is actually putting out in partnership with the YMCA a sports psychology certification program for parents. And part of the reason we're doing it is so that they can actually, again, realize, I coached, in addition to the martial arts way back, but like for the last 10 years when my kids were growing up, I coached a lot of basketball. And one of the things I learned in coaching AAU basketball is I had to actually coach the parents as much as the kids. And part of it was to have them manage their emotions with referees. And the realization you're hurting your kids on the court by you screaming at the referee the way you are. And like how you manage your emotions is teaching your kid how to either enjoy this pressure moment. Like I always tell my kids when it was, I always say, listen, you live for this moment. Like this is fantastic. This isn't pressure. This is exciting. This is why you play sports. That's different than, their parents screaming at them like from the sidelines. And that's where this ripple stuff really comes from and kind of helping them kind of understand and like process the moment differently. But I'm just so like blown away by the way you've made it crystal clear around this idea of this is skill building, right? And that your emotions, what happens to you and how you're feeling in the moment doesn't dictate what's going to happen next. But if you develop a skill set, you can actually, like, again, you manage that energy in that moment. Talk about that a bit.
Well, yeah, I think, I always borrow from the quote, and whether it's truly from Viktor Frankl or not, we're not sure. But this idea that between stimulus and response, there is space.
This space. Yeah.
Space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and freedom. And whether he said it actually or not doesn't matter. It's just a beautiful way of thinking
Yeah.
of how to deal with our feelings. And I think that right now, in terms of there's a lot of chaos just in the world. People are overwhelmed and there's a lot of fear. Um, and we're talking about schools. I mean, there were 80 school shootings last year. That's nerve-wracking.
Oof.
That's nerve-wracking for kids in schools, right, and parents. And so people are on edge. And what we know is that when we're on edge, the space between stimulus and response gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. I mean, I don't know about you, but at the height of the pandemic, I was like, stimulus, react.
There was no space between those two, right?
So that takes the skill piece that we've been talking about. Like you have to build
Yeah.
this, but you have to know what to do with that space, because if you don't know what to do, what happens is that you rely on automatic, habitual, unhelpful ways.
Right.
Example, can I ask you some questions now?
Yeah, go.
All right. Have you ever eaten junk food because you were a little anxious?
It's not my go-to, but yeah, I know people in my life who I love who do.
Or said something that wasn't kind to somebody?
Oh yeah, of course.
Have you ever like had it worked not at National University, but before you got to National University? Have you ever had like a really difficult colleague and you avoided them?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Never
It's
at national though.
have you ever just like gotten into that doom scrolling on social media and you just get lost in social media?
It's not a big habit of mine, but again, know lots of people who do. I get it.
So, what I find in my research is that most people's automatic go-to strategies when they're stressed are eating.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you about drinking alcohol because we're, doing a webinar here. I don't want you to get in trouble. They're avoiding, they're yelling, screaming, they are, just losing themselves in Netflix or TV shows.
Yeah.
Way of just,
All the
not,
numbing behaviors.
not dealing with their feelings. And the question is, why are those our go-to strategies? What do you think?
No, it's generally your experience, combination of your experience and your biology, a little bit of both, right?
Exactly. But a lot of it is just that's what we saw.
Yeah.
We got immediate gratification. Like even when we're really angry and we say like something unkind, like go blank yourself, you do feel a little bit better when you say it. They're around you. That's the problem.
No, no.
Not think
And again, part of it is I think their people are different and their kind of their biochemical reaction might be different based on their biology and some of their experience. And that level of mindfulness of understanding who you are and how you're going to respond is like such a really big deal. You talk a lot about that notion of mindfulness and compassion. Part of the compassion is compassion for yourself. It's like realizing, oh man, yeah, that's a go-to move for me, but like I can change that. Like let's figure out some new go-to moves and some new ways of doing it. But that phase of mindfulness where you can see it, you can go to another place and almost see it, and then compassion for yourself is like, oh, it's okay. Like now let's figure out what we do about this, right?
and that has to be taught too. The
Yeah.
self-compassion piece, it's got to be modeled. You know, if you are witnessing people in your lives beating themselves up when things go wrong, then you're not seeing anyone model self-compassion.
Yeah.
And so I think all of this has to be modeled in terms of its development.
So I want to go a couple places with this. One is, we've done a lot of work in the last 15 years on student success strategies. And one of the things we've learned at the K-12 level, but also in the post-secondary level in particular, is like the number one thing that trips students up actually aren't academics. Like it actually is this combination of life and logistics and psychosocial issues that are happening. And Sarah Goldrick-Rab has this wonderful thing about, you can't study if you're hungry, right? The whole notion of basic needs and those kind of things really, really matter. That safety, security, stability thing really matters to create the space for learning to actually happens. And the basic needs movement has really taken off, where like colleges and universities and even school districts that have really tackled poverty dynamics have actually, created the space for students to learn. I would argue, and I'd love to get your take on this, like part of what you're doing is actually, until students actually can kind of learn this art of self-regulation and be around it and see it on a regular basis. Sometimes, in the pandemic was a good example of it, it's just hard to create the space for the learning and growth because they're so busy and stimulus response, right?
And I think I'm really appreciating that you said, people have to have their basic needs met. That is the priority in terms of poverty. Like we need to deal with that. At the same time, being in those conditions makes you dysregulated.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like this chicken egg problem. And we need to make sure that, while we're trying to fight all the isms that are interfering with children's development, while we're trying to fight to make sure there is, good resources for people to have food and shelter, we also at the same time need to teach kids how to manage their emotions, because if they can't manage them, they're not going to be able to focus. They
Yeah.
can't. My passion for this work is because of education. I was a failing student, and I know people like, how did you become a Yale professor when you were a failing student? It was because I was blessed in life with a teacher who was my uncle, who created the conditions for me to have permission to feel.
Yeah.
And that was, book number one. But I can't I have gone on now to study this in much greater detail than when I did in terms of when I wrote the book. So the book inspired me to do a whole lot of research on this concept. And what I found was that only about a third of us believe, or a belief, did have someone that, was that emotional ally when we were
Yeah.
only a third of us. I mean,
So hard.
yeah.
It's like Colin Powell when he used to talk about with America's Promise work that, if a kid can just have one functional adult in their life who can help them like understand the direct, it just changes the world, right? And we talk about all the time, we were talking about before, National University is predominantly, 50,000 students, but it's 100% non-traditional working and military students. We
Mhm.
challenge every one of our graduates with this thing around each one reach one. And the idea is that each one of you is walking across the commencement stage. You're now a model. You're now somebody who can actually show somebody else like how they can get on that same pathway. And I'm just thinking about this in the world of education, and we've got a big audience of educators here. What is, some of the best advice you would give them based on the last two books and the, hundreds of articles you've written? They're going to do one, two, or three things to really make an impact on this with their, maybe primary, secondary, or even in post-secondary folks that they're working with.
So in relation to emotion regulation and emotional intelligence, I think in the final kind of chapter of my book, Dealing with Feeling, I talk about the idea of being the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I would just ask people who are on the webinar today to take a moment and just think about that. As an educator, how do you want to be seen? How would you like to be talked about? And how would you like to be experienced in your classroom?
Yeah.
Or whatever role you're in? As the president of university, like, what do you want your reputation to be like? What do you want people to say about you? And let's just, maybe we can all just do that for a minute. Like, how do you want to be seen, talked about, and experienced? For most people, words like kind, caring, compassionate, patient come up. And so with those attributes in mind, if that's, kind of your North Star for your best version of yourself, what I recommend to people is to kind of use that as a guide for when they go into their classroom.
Yeah.
Your personal charter. And so before you come into school in the morning, you might take a deep breath and say, oh, my best self is someone who is kind, compassionate, and patient. Yeah. So no matter what happens today, I can respond to that stimulus through the lens of the person who is calm, compassionate, and patient. And my research shows that actually will make a difference in our lives. And that can be done proactively. So you can kind of prime yourself to be good at regulating. And then, of course, ultimately we can use that in the moment.
Yeah.
When that kid says, I hate this class, and you're automatic, what do you think you are talking to me that way? You take that breath and you're like, oh, okay, I forgot. I'm calm, caring, compassionate, patient. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just say one more thing about that. So you can play around with this, and you don't have, that's one version of the best self, which is like adjectives. But because I have a very special role, I'm joking, but my special role is I actually am the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence.
Yeah.
I put whoever that guy is. Marc Brackett is like the guy from Jersey who, whatever. But the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence is like the Yoda of emotion. I have now made emotion regulation a game. And so when someone comes after me and says something mean or hurtful, or I'm triggered by someone, I just go to that director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, show me what to do here. Come on, coming out. And it works.
No, I love it. I love it. Again, you're managing the energy, right? In that moment, which is really kind of great. An important part of that process, and I'd love to get your take on this, is if you're going to do that, developing the emotional regulation as a skill, and you're kind of working on that aspiration of your best self, you got to combine that with, again, mindfulness and grace. Like, be aware of when you fail. Like, you're going to fail, and you got to give yourself some grace and learn and get better. Learn, and that's the reps idea. You got to get reps, and the more reps you get, and the more you reflect, reps and reflect, that's going to help you in this process. And I think one of the things you're doing really well is like helping people understand, listen, you're not going to be great overnight. This is going to be a process.
And you can't prepare. Part of what I've learned and in my work is that this is going to be life's work. So for example, I was terribly bullied in middle school, and to this day, I still can't believe that nobody intervened. Just like blows my mind that there was not like, and I have memories of like teachers watching me be bullied and didn't do anything about it, which is breaking for this kid. And I think, is it because they didn't know what to say? They didn't know what to do? Was it their mindsets? I don't know. Thank God things have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And people are more aware of these things. But that was my issue then. And then in high school, it was like, what am I going to do with my life? And then it was college, and then it was graduate school. And now I'm like, I run a center with 35 staff, and that's a whole nother thing. And then you get married, and then you have mother-in-laws, life. And then, people pass away in your life. People no longer want to be your friend. I mean, it's just, you can't predict life. And so I think thinking about this kind of like what you were saying as like a muscle that you just have to work out, I think is really important.
And then, the realization that, and I'd love to get your reflection on this. This skill is one, these skills, because it's a family of them, they're going to help you with your decision making. They're going to be helping you with your career. They're going to be helping with your building of relationships, with kind of working to achieve your dreams. Like your ability to do this is going to give you a superpower in some ways. So you're not just reactive and like taking the slings and arrows of life. You're actually kind of choosing your path and not just being in a world of learned helplessness. This is one of those we call them durable skills. I'd love for you to just kind of finish on that, and then we'll ask Nick to come back in and ask any of the audience questions.
Yeah, I want to go back to one thing you said earlier, though, which is about the grace, because you will mess up. Um, and and then we can become self-saboteurs when that happens. We kind of, we down ourselves, like, Mark, you're such an idiot. Mark, you're supposed to be, the expert at this. You're terrible at it. You're a phony. I go through like, you can go through a lot of that negativity. And so we need strategies to deal with that too, which is, some self-compassion, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Also have to learn to apologize. People make mistakes and ask for forgiveness. And sometimes we need courage and emotion regulation to do that too, because we have feelings about that, like, oh, I'm too tough to say, I don't want to look weak, because if I apologize, people will think I'm weak. No, you're not going to be weak. You're going to be stronger because you have the courage to admit that you made a mistake and that you're trying to work towards being a better person. So, and then going back to this, this durable skill mindset, I think you're right. These are very specific, durable skills, ranging from one that I think is really a big part of your life, which is the breathing exercises and the mindfulness exercises, because I hear you talking about that a lot. And that's important because it helps you have that mind that is still. And it's a good thing. Stay off the technology, because your brain will be better for it.
Yeah. Part of the larger process. There's no doubt about that.
But we need the cognitive strategies. We need the relationship strategies. We need to take care of ourselves by getting good sleep and eating good foods and getting exercise. And so I'd like to just say that emotion regulation is never just one thing. It's kind of setting your life up to be.
And as we bring Nick in, Mark, I just want to say this and just take this in the best way. It's like part of this also is surrounding yourself with models of people who do this well and learning from them and actually building that skill. I mean, just being in this conversation with you, I'm like, okay, this guy's got it. He's doing this kind of work. Like I'm just so impressed by you. And obviously reading your work, driving this, it's just been fun to be in the larger dialogue. And I'm happy to turn it over to Nick to fix all the bad questions I gave.
Before you jump in, Mark, I wanted to share something funny with you. So I told you that I had an uncle who was my hero, and his daughter has a daughter. Her name is Esme, and she's my niece, and she's now 21 in college. And we've, she's been a big part of my life since she's adopted from Guatemala, and I actually went with her mom to bring her home back 20 years ago. And so she's very, very close to me, and I'm close to her. But here's the funny thing is, so she was in college last year, and she wanted to be in a sorority, and it didn't go very well. And she called me up, and she's like, Uncle Mark, I have something to tell you. It is very difficult to be around people who haven't had a good emotion education. And I was like,
well trained. You gotta love it. Hey, Nick.
Hey, thank you. Oh my God, that was such a great conversation. We have lots of questions. I know we only have time for one or two, so I'm just going to pick a couple and I have a bunch myself too, but I'll hold off on those. So the one I think is really interesting is, how do you think our ability to sense and recognize emotions, both in ourselves and others, impacts our learning and relationships? And how can experience help us better manage those emotions for a more successful school year?
Well, that's a lot of questions in
There's a
one.
lot of questions. I know, that's why I picked
So
it.
I think emotional self-awareness is the most important piece of this, because you have to label it to regulate it. And I think a lot of us misperceive like a kid's behavior in the classroom for what they're feeling. So I come into school and I'm like, I hate this classroom or whatever it might be. And you think, oh, Mark's angry because he's got a, his clenched fists and he's making the gritted teeth. And I would like to encourage people to say, oh, that's a symptom of an emotion, but I have really no clue about what the kid is feeling. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be fear, it could be shame. My job is to be curious, to get to have a relationship with this child, so they trust me and tell me what they're really experiencing, so that I can then work with them to find a strategy to help them manage their emotions so they could be more present and a better learner.
That's great. So I am going to ask my question, because it kind of reminded me of the piece in your book that you're really talking about, like your feelings about feelings,
Yeah.
right? And like when adults have biases about, the feelings, the feelings of their kids, right? Like that can all then cause like that misrepresentation and that bias of like how they're behaving, right? And so
Yeah.
this is like, how do you kind of pay attention and kind of reflect on your biases and your feelings of your feelings? Like how do you notice that?
Well, now there's a term, now there's like a thing about it. And so you have to ask yourself questions. Like for me, the example I've given was that when I was bullied as a kid and I was really scared, um, I had shame, about being like a victim of bullying. And so it was like the shame that really prohibited me from talking about it. It wasn't the fear, it was the shame about the bullying. And so I think that for parents and for teachers and for all of us, um, I have an exercise in my book. It's like, ask yourself, like, what is your relationship to this emotion?
Mm.
And I shared a very personal story. Like for me, because I was bullied badly, and it was always like, Brackett, like, don't be so happy right now. Sometimes when I'm really in a really positive place, I even have this like weird feeling like something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go wrong. Like, don't be too happy for too long. And I've had to work through that. And, that was my experience. And I'm happier than I've ever was. But nevertheless, I still have that tendency. And so I would just ask people, like, when you think about different emotions, like, what's your story around the feeling? And that will help you understand some of those biases.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Brackett.
You.
Thank you, Dr. Milliron, for engaging in that thoughtful conversation today. So as you've heard today, that the importance of understanding our emotions is even more important in our busy lives. We are thrilled to actually announce the launch of our new Harmony at Home app. It just launched last week, so we're very excited. It's built for busy parents. Harmony at Home is a family-centered mobile app designed to strengthen relationship skills for both adults and children. It offers carefully curated, research-backed resources paired with real-world activities families can enjoy together. So it really takes the best of Harmony and puts it in an app to use at home, because we know that true connection is facilitated not by the screen, is facilitated by the screen, but not created by it. It is now available on the Android and iOS, and you can learn more by visiting the link on your screen. So I know we are about out of time, but we would love to hear from our guests' final thoughts about what is the most important when thinking about, and to keep in mind about all of this work and how it relates to the start of the school year. Dr. Brackett, you want to go first, or Dr. Miller?
I'll let Mark finish this up for sure. And one of the things I'll just say is that um, this is an important conversation, and it's more important than you think it is, because as I go back to that notion of basic needs, this ability to be able to manage stress, manage the environment that's around you, and to not just be at the dealing with the kind of slings and arrows that are coming at you. There are so many people who are in the world of learning who are they're really derailed by life happening. And this ability to manage yourself helps you on the psychosocial side. It helps you manage the life and logistic issues, and is one of the most important parts of navigating yourself through an education pathway. And I just think, I'm so happy, Mark, that you've published the second book and are catalyzing this larger conversation, because the more we can get people thinking about how we get people thinking about this, it's going to be good stuff for the world of education.
Thank you, Mark. And if you ever want a job as a researcher in my lab, just you have the perfect mindset for this, so I really appreciate it. And I'll just end by saying that there's a lot of pressure on educators right now, and I empathize with you. It is one of the toughest jobs in the world, but there is that space between when we get activated and when we say or do something. And I promise you can fill that space with healthy strategies that will preserve your well-being, that will help you sleep better at night, that will help you feel, and have greater well-being. But it will also help you create an environment for your students where they feel safe, where they feel connected, where they feel valued, where they feel like they can be their true selves. And I think that's the best gift you can give to yourself, and the best gift that you can give to your students.
Well, thank you so much. That was really a great conversation. I really, really appreciate it. We at Harmony and our community appreciates it. We're also excited that after this webinar, we'll be able to assign random numbers to 200 live participants. And on behalf of Harmony, ship you a copy of the book, of Dr. Brackett's new book. The selected winners will definitely hear from us this week. And here's the QR code if you'd like to order additional copies or learn more about the book. And I think your book clubs are also on there, right? When you have book clubs about the book.
Yeah, just briefly, Nick,
Yeah.
For those of you who are interested in going a step further than our conversation today, if you have a copy of the book, there'll be 3 sessions starting in a couple of weeks, and you can just sign up on my website.
Great. Perfect. Love it. All right. So we'd love to end our poll today one more time to check into how you're feeling now that we just kind of ended this webinar. So let us know how you're feeling now at the end of this webinar presentation. Again, tired, overwhelmed, present, content, curious, or energized. Definitely seeing tired decrease. So that's a good sign. So I think you all did your job. I like that there's more of a equalness across present, content, curious, and energized before now than there was before. So that's amazing. Oh, now you can see it. Sorry. So yeah, so tired and overwhelmed got much lower than they were before. And energized, curious, content, and present definitely kind of evened us out. So thank you so much, everybody. Good to see how your emotions processed. All right, and then last but not least, don't miss our next webinar next week on another important topic to continue building on the success of starting a school year strong. So join Dr. Terrell Strayhorn as he shares his latest research around belonging. He'll be joined by a panel of inspiring educators who will share their examples of building that sense of belonging in their classrooms and communities. Thanks again to our distinguished guests. We thank you to our audience for taking the time out of your day to join our webinar. Be on the lookout for a survey popping up on your screen. We appreciate you sharing your feedback on our survey so we can improve our webinars. We're grateful for each of you and have a wonderful day. Thanks all.
Thank you.